You are now listening to FireWall Chats with the IT-ISAC. Today's guests are Eric Coomer, Director of Product Strategy for Dominion Voting, Sam Derheimer, Director of Government Affairs for Hart InterCivic, and Brian Hancock, Director of Infrastructure Policy and Product Development for Unisyn Voting Solutions. All three are members of our Elections Industry Special Interest Group and join us today to discuss the group's work and progress since its inception 2 years ago.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the IT-ISAC FireWall Chats podcast. My name is Scott Algier, and I'm the Executive Director of the IT-ISAC. I'd like to welcome you to the first of our two-part session on election security and the work of the IT-ISAC Elections Industry Special Interest Group. We are fortunate to have three of our Special Interest Group members with us today. We have Brian Hancock with Unisyn. He is the Director of Infrastructure Policy, Product Development. Eric Coomer, who is the Director of Product Strategy and Security at Dominion Voting Systems. And Sam Derheimer, who is the Director of Government Affairs at Hart InterCivic. So we appreciate you taking the time. So Eric, can you begin a little bit by introducing yourself and Dominion?
Sure. As you said, my name's Eric Coomer. I'm the Director of Product Strategy and Security for Dominion Voting Systems. I've been with Dominion since 2010. Prior to that, I was the VP of Development and Engineering for Sequoia Voting Systems, whose assets were acquired by Dominion in 2010. So I've got about 15 years in the elections industry. And yeah, that's about it.
Excellent, thank you. Sam.
Yeah, great. So I'm Sam Derheimer. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Hart InterCivic. Hart's based in Austin, Texas. We've been doing business there for over 100 years. We actually started as a paper company, supplying a lot of the paper ballots to counties across Texas and the region, and then started making election systems after the 2000 election. All of our devices, all of our systems designed and manufactured right in Austin. We're up, we've got customers kind of across about 20 different states. Yeah, and that pretty much, that's Hart InterCivic.
Super, thank you. And Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, appreciate it. As you noted earlier, I'm the Director of Infrastructure Policy and Product Development for Unisyn. I'm also currently the 2020 Chair of the EISCC. Sam here is the Vice Chair. He didn't say that, but I'll say that for him. So Sam, thank you for all the work you're doing with that organization this year as well. I've been in election administration 35-ish years, and prior to my employment at Unisyn, I was the Director of Testing and Certification at the United States Election Assistance Commission.
Thank you. So appreciate all of your spending the time to meet with us today. So we want to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing in coordinated vulnerability disclosures. So the IT-ISAC formed this special interest group about 2 years ago. One of the key initial work items that we decided we needed to work on was coordinated vulnerability disclosure. So Sam, perhaps I'll turn it over to you first and ask you why is this an important topic for the elections industry?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I really appreciate that. This has really improved our own ability to make our companies stronger and our industry as a whole stronger, right? And one of the things that we've learned as we've worked with the SIG and worked with security researchers across the country is that it takes a lot of learning and it takes a lot of coordination to get these programs and these policies right, but they don't have to be everyone's version of perfect to make our whole industry better. And that's something that we've really been working on, right? We have been engaging across the board in our company through the SEC that Brian mentioned earlier, through the SIG, the folks you're hearing from today, to really learn to make these programs as strong and as secure as they can possibly be, right? We heard from the research community a few years ago, and they really came to us and said, these programs, these policies are important, and this is how you build them. We listened. We then came back to them specifically through the SIG and said, these are our concerns and these are our challenges given the characteristics of our industry, given the legal requirements. And we need to be able to fit this policy to those characteristics and those legal requirements. and the researchers listened, and they got back to us and really helped us form fit the policies that would best work given, all of the risks and everything that come along with elections that even other areas of critical infrastructure don't have to deal with. So that's kind of a long way of just saying that it's been a great partnership, and big steps have been taken over the past few years. I'm really proud of where the industry has gotten.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you for your participation in the SIG and your contributions. So, Brian, what have you learned? Why is this important?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I think we all have always realized that testing beyond what's required in the EAC testing and certification program is vital, right? Those standards are definitionally a bar by which to measure voting systems to make sure they meet some minimum requirements for, functionality, usability, security, some other things. But we all do a lot of additional QA testing, outside usability testing, penetration testing over the past few years, and all of those things teach us something and show us ways that we can improve our voting system. I think with vulnerability disclosure, it's really the next logical step to maturing the election technology industry. Right now, the will among industry members is there, and I just think that the time has come to make it a reality.
Thank you. And Eric, Dominion's been participating from the beginning along with Brian and Sam. So what have you all learned over the last couple of years regarding the importance of coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs?
Yeah, I think at the root of it, it's really about building trust. Obviously, since 2016, a lot of the issues around elections has really focused on, sort of disinformation campaigns, trying to sow distrust in the whole process. And I think opening up a public CVDP really starts to regain some of that trust and really open the systems to, independent review showing that these systems really are as secure as they can be and still providing, free, fair, and accurate elections. And I think that that's really key. I mean, the other is an issue of resources, right? I mean, it's leveraging expertise that we just wouldn't be able to have in-house, and really going outside to independent parties that also care very deeply about security in elections and using their expertise to make the systems better. And I think that that's key.
Excellent. So thank you. So you mentioned something that we'll come back to in a second, which is trust, right? And how we build trust across the community. But first, I want to give each of you a chance to talk about where your company is today. So the IT-ISAC issued a report earlier this month about noting the progress that the industry has made during these last 2 years. So Brian, where's your company in terms of creating your coordinated vulnerability disclosure policy?
Sure. We have finalized what we're calling a foundational vulnerability disclosure program that we hope to publish on our website tomorrow. That's our goal. Our initial scope is modest. It covers our public-facing website, but over the coming months, we're going to be engaging with security researchers as part of our ongoing process to mature and expand our vulnerability disclosure program. And I really expect that this effort is going to lead to the development of what I would call a managed vulnerability disclosure program to one of our more mature voting systems over the next several months. That's certainly our goal. We currently have a secure email account for reporting vulnerabilities, which is going to be monitored by our Director of Software Development on a daily basis. Along with the scope in that document, we've included a policy on our general guidelines for responsible disclosure, what researchers can expect to get from Unisyn in this policy, and a hold harmless statement that basically states if researchers follow laws, applicable laws in our policies, we will not pursue any legal action against them for anything that they're going to report to us. So I think those are all important steps in the right direction.
Yeah, so it sounds like great progress has been made. When you compare where people were in the beginning to today, it sounds like great progress. Eric, how's Dominion doing with its policies, and what level of development are you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're pretty much on board with everybody else. So we're in the final stages. We've actually finalized internally our CVD policies. We're hoping to actually launch a new website, and that will be a key focus under our security page, hopefully by the end of the month, and certainly shortly thereafter, if not by the end of the month. Much like Brian just said, we have a dedicated security email. It is security@dominionvoting.com that will provide the communication for any vulnerability disclosures that will be monitored. We have, language on prompt response times, and we have obviously some safe harbor language similar to what Brian mentioned. As long as the policies adhered to, we will not seek any kind of redress against good faith researchers. And again, it really is right now kind of focused on our public facing assets, but that will be extended to all of our core systems and products as the program matures.
Great, thank you. And it's Sam.
Yeah, I think, peeling the curtain back a little bit, I think since this session is being pre-recorded, I can say that Hart's policy should be up by the time this video is posted or very shortly after. Look, at Hart, we're committed to this. A robust vulnerability reporting program is a cornerstone. And look, to be fair, it's a new cornerstone, but it's a cornerstone nonetheless of a holistic approach to security. The research community came to the election space and proved their intentions. They proved they had good intentions, that they were operating in good faith, and that their expertise was valuable. And it was time that the industry responded in kind with good faith and an understanding that our goals are the same: safe, secure, accessible elections. And so I'm really happy to say that we're right in line with Brian, with Eric, and with some of the other companies in this industry. We also have, and we've had, a dedicated email, security@hartic.com, posted on our website for a while. And hopefully by the time this video is posted, our full policy will be up.
Well, that's great. And it also brings us back to this trust concept that I put in the parking lot a couple of minutes ago. Can you describe a little bit, Sam, about how the trust has evolved between the industry and researchers, and what you all are doing to build that trust and engage with the security researchers?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's such a linchpin to the advancements that this industry has made, especially, election officials across the country are worrying, and they're working together with us to explore how they can improve, coordinated vulnerability disclosure as well, right? The risk of exposing critical vulnerabilities during a live election poses a unique and serious threat in elections. It's a risk that, thankfully, even most other sectors of critical infrastructure escape. That risk shifts and dictates so much of these policies, when and how we can make disclosures, for instance. And it really impacts how we conceive and how we structure our security reporting policies. And through the SIG, right, validating some of these great researchers from across the country to us, I think it really saved us a lot of time in building trust and understanding, the good faith they were coming to us and our ability to kind of communicate what our needs in the election industry are so that we can adapt and fit those policies to make sure they work not only for us, but for the end user, which is both the election officials and ultimately the voter, right? Perception plays a huge role in voting behavior. And so we are very conscious of what we do and what we expose during live election seasons. And I think that trust with the research community is just imperative in successful and effective vulnerability reporting policies, right? Just last week at DEF CON, there was a really great discussion by a few researchers. They're opening and they're adapting to the realities of elections too, right? Especially not disclosing vulnerabilities during live elections, maybe even being willing to sign NDAs until after an election has occurred, right? There's a give and take there that I think is essential. And without that trust, And really the SIG did so much to build and validate that trust. I don't think we'd be where we are today. So it's just been invaluable.
Excellent. So Eric, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, one of the key things is that trust is a two-way street, right? We have to trust that the researchers that we're engaging with are acting in good faith. They have to trust that we're being open and transparent about things. And I think that that's come a long way over the years. Certainly 5 years ago, I don't know if any vendor would have ever really considered participating in something like DEF CON's Voting Village. I can say that last year, 2019's DEF CON, we actually did bring some equipment out. We didn't put it out on the floor. We couldn't quite come to a final agreement on some terms with the organizers, but we did open up some open public roundtable discussions that we had with some of the attendees there. And I think that was a good first step. And I think that we made that first step effort. I think it helped give some assurance to the research community that we are committed to this. But it's still gonna take some time, and there's a long road to go down. But being at DEF CON last year, especially seeing some of the more, let's say, collegial villages like the industrial control systems or the medical device manufacturers working really tightly hand in hand with the independent researchers. I think everybody on this podcast right now has the hope that we can get to something like that in the elections industry in the near future.
And Brian, any lessons learned from you? Plans for improving relationships with the researcher community?
Yeah, sure. I agree with Eric that the trust is still evolving in our industry. The more we work with the research community, I think the more the trust grows on both sides. I really think one of the breakthroughs came when the election industry was designated as critical infrastructure. It really hammered home to everybody, right, from the federal level on down to the smallest county out there, that security is important, and it's something we need to take seriously if we want our democracy to function as we envision it. And as I said, we're working constantly. We are going to continue to work over the next several months with the research community to develop our vulnerability program. And we're even in the early stages of discussing some more outside the box things in our company. Things like perhaps sponsoring a hackathon with university students in Southern California. Our company's located in Vista, California. There's a lot of good talent out there. So that's not something that's out of the question either. So a lot of things happening.
Awesome. So recognizing the progress we've made, things aren't perfect. There are still gaps out there. So Eric, what do you think are some of the gaps that we've identified or the company's identified throughout this process?
I'm gonna steal everybody's thunder and go right into the certification issues. It's useful to identify vulnerabilities and then mitigations around that. But if the mitigations extend to something like operating system patches or all the way down to actually needing code changes, getting those out into the field is a daunting task right now. There has been some movement at that, with the EACs kind of having new language around de minimis software changes and things like that. But when you realize that, we're not talking about monolithic customer bases, right? We're talking about individual counties with sometimes, a few machines up to several thousand machines, and just getting certified patches and then getting those out into the field. Again, that's the reality of it. It can be a very daunting task. I think that's something that really needs, much more work. I know there's ongoing discussions with the EAC on how to improve those processes, but again, that's evolving for sure. The other is just, again, since, a lot of these systems are standalone, how do we get access to independent researchers to do their investigations? Again, that's really something that is evolving and still needs some real work on how to solve that. I think those are the two biggest issues.
So Brian, your thoughts on gaps?
Yeah, because this is so new to our industry, there are a lot of gaps. And I'll just kind of follow on something that Eric said. He kind of hit on the federal certification program, but state certification programs are equally important. And sometimes they're just as daunting or more daunting because depending on the state, they have very limited time frames in which we can certify our systems. And so those need to be worked into this process as well. But a couple of other things is, I think, working with our industry partners in whatever way we can to help expand vulnerability disclosure programs beyond those of us on this podcast, right? The vote tabulation vendors, right? There are e-poll book vendors and election night reporting folks and others that I think would benefit from vulnerability disclosure as well. And finally, I think one of the things that's affected our company is maturing our own program and being able to find the resources to allocate to this maturation process. We're a fairly small company, and to be able to do this correctly, we want to make sure that we allocate the appropriate resources to do it, right? We don't want to put a program up there and then fail, right? Or set ourselves up to fail. So a lot of resource issues we need to work through as well.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point, right? It's not just having a policy and saying, here's what the policy is. You need the ability to intake and research and staff to engage with the researchers. It's about capacity building. It's not just the policy. So Sam, what are some gaps from your perspective?
Both Brian and Eric really covered some of the biggest technical gaps, the logistical gaps pretty well. Just taking a step back, I think the realization that there will be gaps. Our adversaries will adapt. We will too. Since 2016, the elections community has kind of adopted a new mantra that security is a race with no finish line. Adapt and overcome. That's our reality. It's not changing anytime soon. The very best security comes from a holistic approach that unites technology, people, and processes, and the recognition that the best plans and policies today will have gaps tomorrow. So I think, building these relationships, building that constant information loop cycle so that we are updating the security researchers at what we're doing, they're updating us at what they're seeing out in real time. That's where we're building the foundation to fill in the gaps that we don't even know about today. And I think that's really important as we look past 2020.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you for that. So we have discussed where your companies are, where we've been, building trust, where the gaps there are. So Eric, any additional thoughts that you might have about what's the most important thing you or your company have learned going through this process, and anything else you would like to share about the experience of developing these coordinated vulnerability disclosure policies?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like setting off into the frontier, right? It's going to be interesting as again, I think everybody is coming out or will soon have, a well-defined CVD policy. It's going to be interesting how the research community reacts to that, and it's going to be an interesting time, and it's certainly happening at an interesting time as we head into November general. And I hope that it continues after that. Right now we're getting a lot of focus, and I think it's good. It's focusing on the various issues around elections, and then it's not as simple as a lot of people think it is. And I hope that interest remains post-November, and it doesn't just kind of fall into the background and then come back up in another 2 years when we have another major cycle. I think that's really key as well.
Yeah, awesome. So I think you raised an interesting point, which is that although coordinated vulnerability disclosure policies, the concept is not really a new one, right? The IT industry has been doing it for a while. Each industry that does it has its own challenges. So what we did early on, I think, was a really good, where we brought in some other industries who have adopted CVD programs and who are perhaps more similar to yours in terms of regulation, and try and figure out how to do it, what might make sense. So I think that was really interesting point that you made, and a good decision by the SIG early on to look at what other sectors are doing and how can we learn from them. So, Brian, your thoughts about where the most important aspect is that you've learned, or any lessons learned going through this process, anything else you'd like to add?
Sure, Scott. Yeah, I think what we've learned, or at least what I've learned, or have reinforced, this is damn hard to put together a good program like this, right? There are legal ramifications, there are practical and resource ramifications, as I spoke about, and then there's just sort of the socializing folks internally in your company to the importance of this, particularly upper management, right? Sometimes it's tough to get buy-off on some new programs like this. And it really takes a lot of work to, get this through, but I think it's worthwhile, and I think we're all working to do that, and we've successfully done that in our companies, obviously, at this point. Other than that, just big thanks to the IT-ISAC, to yourself, to all the staff there, and to our advisory committee members that have helped us over the past, 18 months or so to get this to where we are now. So it's been a huge help, and so thank you and everybody on your staff.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for that. And Sam, over to you, sir.
You know what? A couple years ago, the researchers came to us, and let's be honest, they knocked us on the head a bit, and the industry needed it. That knocking kind of started a mutually beneficial cycle of information sharing. And that sharing, that engagement guided by the SIG with the research community was key to getting to where we are today. And it needs to continue. And that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned, right? I mentioned earlier, we're talking about a race with no finish. In the coming years, I'm looking forward to adapting, expanding, and improving our policy. The policy we have today, it's our first draft. It's going to improve and it's going to adapt over the coming years. I'm going to need that continued feedback, that continued engagement with the research community to make sure that we are moving forward in a way that is beneficial to us as a company, beneficial to the elections industry, and ultimately to the voter. So yeah, I think that's the best thing I've learned, is that the good faith efforts from both sides really results in positive steps forward.
Great, thank you. Yep, so another great point. Just because companies may have an initial policy doesn't mean that it's the end product. Even companies who have been doing this for years are constantly revising, updating, implementing new policies as they implement them, and learn lessons from what works and what doesn't work, what might need adjusting, how they can do better. So I think that that's a really important point, is that this is the initial product, but not the end product. So we are about to wrap up, coming close to the end. On the topic of initial products, the IT-ISAC is providing a link to all of the SIG members' coordinated vulnerability disclosure policies as they become available. So you can find those on itisac.org and search for the Elections Industry Special Interest Group. But Brian and Eric and Sam, I will give you an opportunity before we go to let people know where they might be able to find yours when the time is right. So Sam, if someone's looking for your policies, where should they go?
They should just visit our website, HartInterCivic.com. You'll see some tabs up in the upper right-hand corner. There's one that's pretty clearly marked security, and you're going to find it right there.
Brian?
Very similar, UnisynVoting.com. We have a security tab at the top of the page. All our security information can be accessed from that page.
And Eric?
Yeah, it'll be on our website, DominionVoting.com, and there will be a security link, and it will give you the policy and all of the contact information.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you for spending your time with us today. Thank you for the work you're doing at the SIG with your companies, helping to make not only your company secure, but the elections secure, and maintaining trust and integrity in the results of the election. It's really important work. It's very complicated work, and I appreciate the work that you do. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for listening to this episode of FireWall Chats. Stay tuned for our next episode featuring 3 more of our elections industry special interest group members. For more information about this special interest group, please visit www.it-isac.org.